Alrighty, welcome to the 155th edition of the MMA Circus here on BloodyElbow.com and live on YouTube. My name is Nick Baldwin. I'm your host as always, and joining us on this very special edition of the podcast is a name you know, a face you know. It is Jed Meshew, our guest co-host of MMAfighting.com. Jed, I know you're tired and you have a lot of stuff to do afterwards. Nonetheless, thanks for joining me as always. How's it going?
It's always good. I'm always tired, always the same every day of my life.
Yeah, I say off the top that you're tired and you have stuff to do, but that's not really any different. And so I'm not going to be lenient as to, anything, so to speak. We'll just treat this as a regular show.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
So anybody listening would know that we did the MMA Circus 2 days ago. Andrew and I talked about a lot of nothing, to be quite frank about it. You might be wondering why we're live 2 days later. Well, if you guys missed my programming note, which I sent out on Twitter earlier this week, which I don't think got any free tweets, so probably no one saw it, which is fine. We will not be doing a episode of this show next week or any of my other podcasts or interviews before the battle. We don't have a UFC next week, thank God. But even if we did, there wouldn't be a show, and Beyond Combat will not be live next week. That is because I am off on vacation on Saturday until the very end of March. I believe I get back on the 29th. So everything will be off the table as far as podcast and interview goes, but we couldn't not do the right amount of MMA circuses because that would be pain to everybody. And so here we are twice in 1 week. You can't get much better than that. So if you did listen to last Tuesday's show, you will know that Andrew and I talked a lot about nothing, but I actually found a few things to talk about, and I'm kind of looking forward to this. We're going to start things off a little differently here on episode 155 and talk about some of our personal top upcoming underrated matchups. So we're not going to talk about Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov because we're all looking forward to that. We all love Gaethje Poirier. We all cannot wait for Brown Condit. We can't wait for, even Namajunas Joanna, I think a lot of people are looking forward to. But if you look a little deeper in these cards, or maybe even some main event fights that aren't quite getting the love they deserve in our eyes, that's sort of what we're trying to get at. Jed, I'll sort of give the floor to you. Do you have one that really stands out among the rest, or maybe a couple? Well, I guess say one, and then we'll talk about it a little bit, and we'll go from there.
Sure. When you pitched this to me, I honestly don't have a great idea of what's coming up. I went and looked through the cards. Most of it's stuff that either, we're excited for or no one cares about at all. There's not really a lot of underrated activity in the coming weeks that I've noticed particularly. But I will start off. I pulled a couple, and I think the one that I think is probably the best for these kind of parameters is the main event of UFC 224. I know it's a main event, so that kind of feels a little odd, but Amanda Nunes versus Raquel Pennington. I think most people expect this to be a really terrible pay-per-view as far as numbers-wise. I know most people aren't really excited about this even a little bit. I personally think the fight's really good. I know Raquel Pennington coming off a big long layoff, but she looked really good against Miesha Tate in her last bout. She's been, consistently improving and putting things together. And as good as Amanda Nunes has looked, winning the title, losing the title, but somehow still keeping it against Valentina Shevchenko, I think she's a fighter with holes that you can exploit, and she's closing them every day. But Raquel Pennington is the kind of tough, durable out that's probably not going to end up winning, but can at least, make Amanda Nunes work a little harder than she has had to in most of her other, title efforts. So, I'm actually sort of excited about that. What about you, Nick? What's tickling your fancy?
Well, just to talk about that Amanda Nunes Raquel Pennington fight for a minute or so, I actually really like that fight too. And I find it not odd. I know why people aren't in love with it because we wanted Nunes Cyborg. That was sort of the fight to make for the UFC featherweight title. Would have been the super fight, maybe the first, I guess, technically the first super fight in the women's divisions, I guess, unless I'm forgetting anything else. Champion versus champion, that is current champion, because Holly Holm for Cyborg wouldn't have counted because Holm lost the title way back, but way before that. But yeah, I like this fight. I think Pennington can make it a fight. She's good on the feet. Nunes is good. Nunes is better on the ground, and she's probably still is better on the feet, but She hits harder. She might be a little more technical, but Pennington's pretty active. And I don't think she's going to win this fight. I don't think she's going to be crowned the UFC bantamweight champion. I think Nunes is probably the best women's bantamweight on the planet and might just be the best female fighter if you're putting her up against anybody else. Pound for pound, she's not as far as her credentials and accomplishments go, but she might be able to beat anybody in the world in the female divisions. And so it's hard to pick against her.
Not named Valentina Shevchenko? Is that what you meant to say?
I mean, it's tough to say. We talked about the fight before. I mean, Nunes beat her. Did she really? I think so, but it was so close. I mean, that fight is literally a coin toss to me. And so if Nunes is sick one fight, then yeah, Shevchenko's going to win. If either way around, Nunes will. So
if there are judges who know what they're looking at, Shevchenko's going to win. So
that's your argument to have. It's a fair one because a lot of people did score it for Shevchenko. I was not one of them, so we don't need to have that conversation again. We've had it before, but I like Nunes Pennington. I like it a lot. One fight I wanted to touch on real quick was it's taking place on the Atlantic City card, UFC Fight Night, Barbosa versus Lee, which, by the way, is maybe a little underrated. Like, that's a really great fight at lightweight. Really meaningful, really stylistically fun. But it's on that main card, or likely will be, Aljamain Sterling versus Brett Johns. I don't know about you, Jed, but I really like this fight. I think it's kind of a grappler's dream fight. Brett Johns is really good on top. I think Sterling might be a little more dynamic on the ground. But to me, what makes this so interesting is this sort of seems like Brett Johns, maybe it's going to be his coming out party, but Aljamain Sterling is really talented. He is coming off a knockout loss to Marlon Rice, a brutal one at that. So it's going to be interesting to see how he comes away from that loss. It's not his first one, but his first brutal loss by flying knee knockout. Or was it a flying knee knockout? I think it was.
No,
maybe a kick.
It was a stepping knee.
Okay.
As Sterling was going in for a takedown, got kneed right in the face.
Right, because I remember it. I think it looked like something, it didn't, but doesn't matter. But I really like that fight. I think Johns has better top control, but Sterling, he's kind of funky off his back, on the ground, pretty good, different transitions on all that. I mean, his nickname is the Funk Master. I think that's a really good matchup.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, it's a top 10 matchup. I'm not going to be mad about it, but I don't know. We've been waiting so long for Aljamain Sterling to have his coming out party, and while I do have been impressed in general with Brett Johns, I think he has a ceiling. So I'm not. I don't know. I sort of expect this to end up being bad kickboxing, and that neither dude really. I don't think we're going to get the grappler's delight you were talking about. I think mostly this is just going to be bad kickboxing or, incomplete kickboxing. Both of them can still use a lot of work in those particular categories, and so it's a fine fight. It's a good fight. It has excellent merit, but it's not something that I'm not looking forward to that fight. I'm not going to turn it off or go get a smoke break when it's on, but it's not like, oh yeah, this is. And like, look, to be fair, part of that is just because the main event, like you said, is amazing. And so when you have a main event that is something that exciting and interesting, or at least it is to me, everything else in the card kind of just takes even further of a backseat than it would normally.
Maybe it's because that Atlantic City card, as you said, the main event's good, very good, but out of all the other fights, I feel like Sterling Johns does stand out among the rest. Maybe besides Branch Santos in the co-main, which is a fun fight.
Sterling Johns is the best of like competition-wise, but it's not. I can see that fight being really boring, is what I'm saying. And
maybe you're right, but I think it could be more exciting. I'm a bit more optimistic for this one, anyways. But what I was going to say real quick about this that I forgot to say is that it's kind of like Johns' coming out party, but Sterling's still young and he's still probably getting better. And so it seems like a transition fight, but it really might not, because Sterling is still getting better and he still has a lot of upside. Johns has more because he's undefeated and he hasn't had that first loss and he's a bit less experienced, but one guy is certainly at a different level, but I think that could change. I mean, Brett Johns has a really good chance here, so I like the fight. What else are you looking at as far as underrated matchups coming up?
It's funny because I realized after I sort of jotted all these down, all of the ones I've kind of keyed on are women's matches. And if you go to the UFC on Fox, the next UFC on Fox, headlined by Poirier Gaethje, obviously that is going to be the fight that everyone's talking about with good reason. And then, I mean, the co-main event that evening's Carlos Condit and Matt Brown. I know both of those guys have a lot of tread worn off their particular tires, but that's been one of the only fights I've wanted to see forever. But sneaking in there, kind of hiding away what's probably going to be a main card, although I could see it being, the prelim main event. Michelle Waterson versus Courtney Casey. Courtney Casey is very quietly developed into a good fighter. I mean, she everyone thought she was going to get her ass kicked by Claudia Gadelha. She hung in there, fought tough, made to the scorecards, and had legitimate moments in that fight. Beat Jessica Aguilar, who is a well-respected veteran. At one point, was one of, if not the best flyweights in the world, or whether you consider her actually to have been the best flyweight. She held the title. And then Felice Herrig, who has really improved a dramatic amount. Casey only lost a split decision to her. Obviously, everyone knows who Michelle Waterson is, but I think that fight's actually super, super fun.
Yeah, I can buy that. I mean, I think the fact that Courtney Casey is pretty good on top. She's a good wrestler. She's a lot stronger and she's bigger too. And I think that could come into play here. Waterson probably, if she's able to make the cut in a healthy fashion, I think Waterson, I mean, she's fought at atomweight before. I think that's where she's most comfortable. She only fights at strawweight in the UFC because...
Yeah, she's not going to have any issue making the cut. She'll be fine.
No, probably not. Actually, ages, I mean, I'm sure it's going to get a bit more difficult, but, strawweight's obviously very easy for her, but she's small for strawweight, and Casey is fairly large for strawweight, so I think that makes it interesting. Waterson, to me, is the better fighter, but those physical advantages, it will make it by fight night, by the time we do before the battle for this card and break everything down a bit more in depth, I might find a little difficulty in picking the karate hottie, but I guess that's sort of a wait and see.
The thing is, Waterson is a sneaky good grappler, and Casey's still kind of raw in that regard. So Casey's gonna get takedowns probably, but Waterson might.
How much does she do with them?
Yeah, Waterson might easily be able to sneak to the back there. I think it's gonna be a really fun fight.
Yeah. A couple from the UFC Chile card, the debut in Chile, I believe, I think it was your colleague Luke Thomas who tweeted this when this card was announced a couple of weeks back. I think this is the first South American card outside of Brazil, so that's very interesting, very good, because, the South American market is slowly getting better. We've seen, I think an Ecuador card eventually, Marlon Chidavero, though he's lost a couple, he's right up there. But nonetheless, on this card, one that sort of stands out among a few would be, and we're keeping and staying in the trend of women's MMA matches. It's Alexa Grasso versus Tatiana Suarez. This is a fight I'm surprised they put together because both girls, both fighters, I feel like the UFC kind of is looking to hype up a little bit. Suarez won the Ultimate Fighter. They definitely are pretty high on her. They're backing her. But Alexa Grasso coming over from Invicta FC, she's been looking good. She seems like a fighter the UFC would want to push. I mean, they seem to have been giving her that push. Her last fight against Randa Marcos was in that co-main event spot on that Mexico City card, just down from the Pettis Moreno fight. And so I'm surprised they put it together, but stylistically, this is a lot of fun. Grasso's well-rounded. She's particularly good on the feet, but Suarez is so strong. And although she's not physically much taller than Grasso or doesn't have much of a reach advantage, if at all, but Suarez seems to be a lot stronger. And so I kind of look at this a little bit like the Waterson Casey fight we just talked about. I think this is interesting though. I think, again, I think it's a fun fight between Grasso and Suarez.
It is. I don't really love the matchmaking here.
No, I don't either, just because, as I said, I'm surprised they put it together.
I mean, I understand the matchmaking, but Alexa Grasso had some expectations upon her when she ported over into the UFC, and I mean, immediately she took on Heather Jo Clark, and that was fine. And then Felice Herrig, who turned out to be a much better fighter than most people thought, upset that apple cart. And she got Randa Marcos, and that's pretty tough 1-2 punch there. And I know she ended up getting the decision over Randa Marcos, with the blown weight there, but she kind of needs a softer touch. I mean, she is 24 years old. I know she's 11 fights into her career, but maybe give her a little bit more time to develop here. And I mean, on the other end of that, Tatiana Suarez is what? How old is she even?
She's young,
Her, yeah,
I think.
she's 27, but I meant how like her career started in 2014.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's only got 5 fights in her. And maybe they just haven't been good at grooming people. Like just to be honest, Mackenzie Dern, they're matching her very well, and both of these women have equally as much future potential as Mackenzie Dern has shown at this point in her MMA career, and they're getting a harder touch here. So I'm not in love with that, but the winner of this is going to end up being like, oh, that's the person we're going to try and push. Then that's basically why they're making this, because they aren't smart enough to be able to handle pushing 2 prospects at one time. They can only handle one thing at once.
And that's why they have so many prospects get derailed, because they only have one that they're putting all their marbles behind, and then they lose. And so that's sort of been the story with a lot of fighters, the Sage Northcutt's, the Pedro Zance, et cetera, et cetera. One fight off this Chile card as well, and just quick mention to Vicente Luque versus Chad Laprise. Stylistically, I like that a lot. That's the co-main so far. I doubt it'll stay as that. But the fight I wanted to talk about was actually just announced within the past couple of days, so it's hard to call this an underrated fight just because we haven't really had the time to think or talk about it. But no, I don't think it'll get much love anyways. It's Jared Cannonier versus Dominic Reyes. I don't know what it is exactly about this fight. Again, it was just booked, so I haven't had much time to think about it at all, obviously. I'm sure nor have you, but just when I saw it announced, I'm thinking that's a good fight. I like it. It doesn't make the most sense because Reyes is coming off a win, Cannonier is coming off a loss. But again, for a shallow light heavyweight division, Cannonier and Reyes seem to be guys the UFC would be looking to push. And so I'm a little, no, I'm not angry at it because I think it's a fun fight, but I'm a little confused, so to speak. Maybe it's because they've given up on Cannonier. He's lost a couple.
That is what it is.
He's shown his ceiling. He lost to Glover, and he just lost to Jan Blachowicz. That was not a very good loss, considering he was the betting favorite going into that one. But I like this fight. Cannonier is real strong, but Reyes has he's a lot taller. The reach, surprisingly, is equal, 77 inches each. And so I think this might be the first time in the UFC Reyes won't have a reach advantage. So that'll be interesting to see how he handles that. But also, both guys are pretty well-rounded. Both guys hit harder on the feet. I think Reyes is a better grappler, but Cannonier might be a bit better in the takedown department. I like this fight.
A terrible grappler. Cannonier is like, that's it. Like that's why this is being made. They made this fight because Cannonier can't grapple for shit, and so he showed promise when he was not being forced to. But I mean, if you remember the Blachowicz fight, Blachowicz won that fight because he just took Cannonier down like with ease. He was like, "Oh, okay, well, I can do this," and so he did it. Like it's just I wanted Jared Cannonier to be good, and yeah, he just didn't really end up being there. He's a guy who can he'll stick around and win one, lose one. But to me, this kind of does speak to a fight that they realized, hey, it's not like Jan Blachowicz is Patrick Cummins, even, like much less an actual good wrestler in the division. And he literally took him down with ease and won the fight like that. So I think that they basically are kind of throwing their eggs out of whatever eggs they put in a Cannonier basket, they're dumping them, and we're going to try and move in on Reyes here. I think the fight's fun, but I don't really care about it. Light heavyweight division, I just don't. There's actually like no fight I care about in the light heavyweight division. I honestly don't know what fight you could name that I would give a shit about unless it's John Jones coming back.
It's hard to disagree with that.
Actually, that's untrue. Daniel Cormier versus Ryan Bader. I actually would very much enjoy watching that fight, but that's it. And that fight will never happen. So
yeah.
Instead, I get to settle to watch Luke Rockhold get his shit kicked in by Alexander Gustafsson. Like, that's terrible. So,
one fight, the last one I wanted to mention, I doubt you have any more, but if you do, great. We can talk about that after, is probably the highest profile fight other than the bantamweight title fight we started with, Nunes versus Pennington. The only reason this fight isn't getting more love is because it's on the UFC 223 card next April on the 7th.
I know what you're about to say.
Yeah. Quinterfelder?
Oh, no.
What do you think I was going to say?
I thought you were going to go Ray Borg, Brandon Moreno, because
that is a fun fight. That's really good.
It's a really fun fight.
But I love Quinterfelder. Quinta versus Paul Felder. I mean, that's a terrific matchup, and it's real close too. I mean, Quinta, I guess, is he the better boxer? Maybe, but
Yeah.
Felder's so nasty on the feet when he is on point. His elbows are terrific. I mean, that standing elbow KO over Alexander Ricci last couple of years ago, that was tremendous. This guy is really talented, and he has decent takedowns as well. I mean, I think this is a close fight. It's important. It means a lot, and I cannot wait for it on this stacked Brooklyn card.
See, this is where we're different because I think this fight will be actually like a fun, enjoyable one to watch. But I feel extremely confident in how this fight breaks down, and so it's not. There's less interest to me because if I already know the outcome, I'm not as excited to
Sure.
watch it in general. Because I mean, the only question at all to me is like, does Ally Quinta care? Because like reasonably, Ally Quinta is just better. Like he's just a this is going to be a boxing match, and Ali Quinta has been boxing up better people for the entirety of his UFC career. And on top of that, Paul Felder is a guy who makes mistakes. Like he just has kind of lapses where I've wanted to be a Paul Felder guy for years, and then he kind of shits the bed and loses to Ross Pearson fucking randomly. I mean, he's losing to good guys, but to me, this seems straightforward. He's fighting another good guy who's like Ali Quinta is a step above the Charles Oliveira's of the world, and so I think that this is going to be a pretty straightforward Ali Quinta win. But on the 220, I think the 223 card does have some gems, and like I said, the Borg Moreno fight, I really like that fight. I think Brandon Moreno is a great prospect. I think Ray Borg. Gets an unnecessary amount of shit because he's a flyweight basically, and I don't want to get on my soapbox, but the reality is flyweight's one of the better divisions in the UFC, and everybody just thinks it's not because everybody's stupid. And that's just it. Like, I will die on this hill, but everyone thinks that flyweight sucks just because DJ dominates it. But the reality is DJ just dominates it because he's that good, but flyweight is better than most every other division. And like Ray Borg is a good fighter, and Brandon Moreno is a good fighter, and these are going to be a high-paced, high-action fight that I frankly have no idea what the fuck's going to happen. Like anything can happen in that fight. And then just throw one last one, and we can move on to the next topic, or you can jump back in and say what you got to say. I think the rest of that card honestly has a lot of fun matchups, but the FS1 prelim main event, Karolina Kowalkiewicz versus Felice Herrig. I talked about Felice Herrig for a moment earlier. Kowalkiewicz has been kind of one of my secret favorite fighters for a little bit now. Anybody who's been watching us do this for the last couple of years has heard me be really impressed just with how she has put her game, which isn't really great, together in the most efficient and best way possible. And like it's a good test. The winner of this fight is going to be, a fight away from a title shot. They're not going to get plugged in immediately because there's kind of a backlog of contenders at strawweight at this point, but they're going to get to fight one more person for a title shot and well worth it. So I'm really excited about that fight. I like the Borg Moreno fight. Obviously, the two title fights in that card are great, but 223 is an awesome, awesome card, top to bottom. Really is.
It's probably the first card I really cannot wait for in 2018. Like the Stipe and Ngannou fight was fantastic. I like Cormier Ozdemir underneath it, but the rest of the card didn't do a whole lot for me. This is the one I cannot wait for.
I wouldn't give a shit if the rest of this card was dog shit. Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov is literally the best fight in MMA history. The moment it actually begins, it is the best fight we will have ever watched. And I think it's not going to be an entertaining fight either, but I think on a basis of merits, it is the best fight we'll have ever seen. I'll make an exception for GSP BJ Penn 2.
Fair enough. Okay.
And this fight will probably look a lot like that fight, actually.
So we had the UFC middleweight champion Robert Whittaker is set to take on Yoel Romero in a rematch at UFC 225 at the United Center in Chicago, Illinois on June 9th. This was, of course, reported by BJPenn.com, also reported more recently by your colleague Ariel Helwani of MMAfighting.com. Not confirmed by the UFC quite yet, but I fully expect it to be soon, although they sometimes hold on to news that's already announced for whatever reason, and so it might not be announced for another week. We don't know, but it seems to be it's happening. Whittaker Romero is all but confirmed by the UFC. what do you make of the rematch? And I think the biggest thing I want to touch on, should we think like, is there any reason we should think it could play out differently than the first fight last July, which Whittaker won by competitive decision?
Nope, I think it looks almost exactly the same with a slight uptick in the possibility that Robert Whittaker knocks him out. Like, it's Romero is a guy who mostly loses rounds anyway when he fights. Like, he has probably been behind on the scorecards of most of the fights he has been in. He was losing to Luke Rockhold before he knocked him out. And his game works because he is an excellent opportunist, and he is. I don't want to discredit his game at all. I have nothing but respect for what Yoel Romero has and can accomplish in a cage, but it is not the traditional, like, okay, you win rounds and then you try and win the fight by winning rounds, and if a knockout comes along, it's awesome. His is, if I'm going to get this finish and I'm going to maximize the ways that I can, create openings and find my shot. And he's super, super good at that. But Robert Whittaker is not really going to give him those chances, and Robert Whittaker has proven to be extremely durable so far. And Robert Whittaker, I think there is a far more likelihood that Robert Whittaker is able to take what that first fight and adapt a little more to more quickly be prepared for what Yoel Romero is bringing. Because the reality is, Romero is honestly probably the best athlete that's ever competed in mixed martial arts, like, full stop. And so,
And that's never won a UFC title.
I mean, he also hasn't never won that, but just full stop, I think he's the best athlete that's ever competed in mixed martial arts.
I agree, but what I'm saying is that I think he's the best fighter never to hold a UFC title.
That's a completely different debate.
I know,
but I'm not talking about him as a fighter. I'm talking about him as an athlete. Like, the athleticism he is bringing, the speed, the power, everything about that, the kind of intangible stuff that's harder to quantify when you're preparing is very different. And when you get in there with him, there's an adjustment period. And Robert Whittaker previously talked about that, and about how it took a while and to kind of deal with what Romero was bringing, and basically to get down the timing and to figure out how you can operate around somebody who is so physically gifted. And this time, Whittaker is going to have less of a acclimation period. Since he's done it before, he's seen it before. It's not going to be like, holy shit, I threw out a lazy jab and a hand came whizzing by at 100 miles an hour. He's like, okay, I have to do this. He can be more disciplined. Romero's getting older. I know he is an ageless wonder, but still, all signs point to Whittaker winning, probably more cleanly this time, because he is the best middleweight on the planet.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I'm actually surprised you were in that way. I just expected you to think, okay, of course, Romero always has a chance. I mean, coming off
that, Romero still has a chance.
Yeah, he does, because anybody can
get knocked out by last time.
Yoel Romero can get knocked out by, or can knock out anybody. Beating Luke Rockhold inside the distance doesn't prove that. Rockhold does appear to have some chin issues, but let's be honest, he has enough power. He has the tools to knock out anybody on planet Earth. I just don't see it being any different. And I think it's interesting that we both agree that Whittaker actually will have greater opportunity in this rematch to adjust early on and get used to what Romero brings to the table and start winning the rounds. As we saw, if anybody didn't see the fight or doesn't remember, Romero won the first 2 rounds, and then Whittaker won 3, 4, and 5. And so this time, Romero might still win round 1, but then maybe Whittaker will take the rest. Maybe it'll be 49-46. Maybe it's identical. Maybe Romero does take the first 10 minutes again. But it's interesting how we both think there's a greater chance of Whittaker. Like, I feel Whittaker learned more from the fight than Romero did. And I think that's because he's younger. He has still more upside, even though he's at the top of the division. And I feel like Romero, getting older, but still very athletic, still very good, he's not getting better. He's hit his ceiling. It's a very high one. And it could be as high as the title, because all it takes is one knockout blow. But I just feel like Whittaker learned a lot more from that fight than Romero did. Do you think that's accurate?
I don't know that he learned more. I just think it's like, I don't know the other guy. So Romero went on Rogan's show this week and said he learned about picking his spots a little more, and he started training with John Jones to figure out how best to maximize his stuff and things. And I think both fighters can have learned more. I just think, I guess you can call it learning. I just think it is less.
I
There
think
will
he
be
just
less
was able.
adjustment coming back
Yeah,
from Robert Whittaker. I think he won't have the first 10 minutes to have to learn how to deal with Yoel Romero. He has already done it for 10 minutes. Like he's already done it for 25, so he can just get back in a rhythm. And it's on Yoel Romero to do something different in this fight.
I think that comes down to the fact that Romero is more unorthodox than Whittaker, and so there's only so much Romero can change, even though he needs to change because he lost the first fight and he can't do the same thing or else he'll lose again in the exact same fashion. But when you're fighting a guy, Whittaker is so talented, but he's a bit more straightforward. I mean, Romero is wild. He'll do crazy stuff. You don't know what's coming. So if Whittaker already was able to handle that and got the job done against that style of fighter, I have no doubt that he can do the exact same thing and maybe even in a bit more impressive fashion.
Yep, sounds right to me.
Shall we move on? Shall we
Yeah,
move
definitely,
on
definitely.
to the Professional Fighters League? And
Do we have to?
I think we do. And I'm actually kind of excited to talk about this because
Okay, I'm gonna be real short. So you get to what you're gonna say, and I'm gonna say mine, and then you can go forever.
my thing with the PFL is that it has received a lot of criticism, and I'm here not to not criticize it. I still think the tournament idea is very flaky. The fact that it's, $1 million in 5 or 6 weight classes, where is that money coming from? I wouldn't mind knowing. I know we won't. That's fine. Will they get paid that 1 million? Is it? I mean, I've seen a lot of people say, "Oh, they're not getting the 1 million." It's hard not to because they're, on they have a TV deal. They're a lot more. I mean, I hate to say, like, I'm not using this. I'm about to say they're mainstream. They're more mainstream than say Gender Wars, and Gender Wars, I mean, can lie about anything and it's okay. It's not like that, but it's still very interesting. We've seen the tournament idea not work before, and so why will it work now? I don't know, but what I do think has been good about the PFL is they've made some actually decent signings. They just brought on board Will Brooks a week or two ago. They just signed Rick Story, former UFC welterweight. And today, Freddie Asanso, the former Titan FC lightweight champion, announced he will be involved in the featherweight tournament. I know the former WSOF featherweight champion Lance Palmer will also be in the featherweight tournament. Uh, so we don't know the entire roster. We don't know many of the fighters competing starting June 7th, but they've made some good signings, and I like that because I want the PFL to do well because I like the idea to enough to be enthused by it, to be intrigued by it, and I hope they succeed. I hope it isn't a flop. I going in or earlier, I was scared it would be, but now that they've actually signed some decent talent, I have to admit I'm kind of looking forward to it.
I think you and I have very different ideas of decent talent. I think you and I have very different ideas on what the PFL is, what it wants to be, whether we should enjoy it or not. Uh, the PFL has dangled $1 million tournament carrot, and that tournament isn't going to start until June of this year, despite the fact that they announced this in like last fall. Dollars to donuts, this thing never gets off the ground in any capacity, much less for $1 million for each of the weight division tournaments. Two, I mean, look, like Rick Story is a good body, and like Will Brooks, I think, is a good fighter who's had a bad run here, but let's not act like neither of those guys are super entertaining fighters, and they're not like great fighters. That is the best of kind of the options that they have available to them because they are trying to do this thing this way, when instead they should probably just try and sign talent that hasn't been seen elsewhere. Like instead of giving Chris Wade a contract. Like I don't know, man. Uh I don't want to slander them because I don't know, but I will just say that PFL and the money behind it sure seems like maybe that could bear a little bit more scrutiny. Um, and I mean, realistically, it's an offshoot of WSOF, and all of WSOF really was kind of a way to get like Ray Sefo and his boys paid, and that's good. Like respect the hustle. I'm not knocking it, but I have always it is always kind of stuck in my goat that we have to treat them like they are a real organization because they happen to have a few good fighters under contract and present themselves as such when really they're a regional organization that's really feels like they're putting a grift on some people. I do not give one flying shit about this, and I love tournament MMA. I think tournament MMA is what every non-UFC organization should do, and frankly, I think the UFC should get back into some tournaments because I think it's just like, especially in the American culture, everyone processes tournaments easier, and I do think it's a better way to develop stars. It comes with its own risks and associations as well there, and Bellator struggled with it, but I think there is a way to do it well. I think Grand Prix are a very solid promotional tool, and I wish the UFC would do them more. I sure hope that if this thing does go through, the winning fighters actually get the $1 million prizes. I I will not hold my breath on that particular matter, though, and I'm willing to be proven wrong by them, but I don't think I'm going to be.
I think everything you said is fair. Some of it I disagree with. I mean, you know that considering I already gave my stance, but it's a lot wait and see. The thing is, like, it's hard to know what to make of the talent they've been signing. A lot of it, I mean, every fighter that signs with PFL, especially ones that weren't already in WSOF, so that would be the Will Brooks, the Freddie Asunsaus, and the Rick Stories, three guys I mentioned already. They're signing because that $1 million looks a lot better than a 20-20 UFC deal. And even though they're going up against, 11 other fighters or however other many fighters are in the tournaments.
Holy shit. You realize that they announced this last April.
Oh, I knew it was a lot earlier than the fall. I meant to correct you, but I didn't. I knew they
It has
announced
been
it.
a calendar year, and they are not going to have this shit underway until the summer. Come the fuck on, man. This shit's never happening.
Well, I mean, they've sent out contracts. They've had contracts signed already. Fighters are announcing their signings with PFL. I think it's going to happen. I'm a little more optimistic than you are.
Yeah, they might get a round or two in. They ain't getting through the end of these tournaments.
Really? Do you seriously think that? I'm curious.
Genuinely do
Genuinely?
not believe. I genuinely believe WSOF should have folded like 3 years ago. That is just a straight up like looking at the money that is coming in versus the money that's going out. It is absolutely shocking to me and to many that WSOF didn't just fold. PFL is nothing but a rebranding of WSOF and one with $1 million stakes behind each of these tournaments, like plus whatever the other costs that they're like they can't not pay the fighters. It can't just be a million, take it or leave it, like win it all or win nothing. So like they're gonna still have to pay these fighters. I genuinely don't think the organizations. I've been predicting it for several years and been wrong though, so that's fair. But I don't think the organization lives to the end of the year.
That's fair. I think my thing with the talent, you mentioned that you did say, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I heard you say that they would be better off trying to promote their own prospects and develop fighters like they have in the past instead of bringing on, the Rick Stories of the world. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I think you bring on Rick Story as a guy to get beat up by prospects, but like considering the other people that are like around, there's a non-zero chance he just like wins the whole thing, and then Rick Story's your champion. That's not.
I think, especially for their first year of tournaments, their first grand tournament, and I'm saying first if they do make it more than one, which at this point, you're not even predicting they make it to the whole one, and I think they will, but will they get to a second and a third? We'll see. That seems more and more unlikely. I think bringing on for their first go at this not older literally, but like just competition we've seen in the past, fighters that have been in the UFC, have been at the top of the food chain, so to speak, in their weight classes in MMA. Former Bellator champions like Will Brooks, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's good because it gives the organization, gives the PFL some recognition and sort of makes it look a bit more legit. Because my whole stance on, hey, the PFL actually starts to or is beginning to look a bit more promising than what I expected, what they've been looking like over the past literally a year. It is solely based off the fact that they've signed some guys. I know who they are. And so generally, I think building up your own stars, going from square one to stars, I think that's generally what promotion should do. But in this case, considering all of the criticism PFL has received over the past year since they were first announced and since WSOF turned into the PFL, I think bringing on talent that is recognized is good because it provides a bit more legitimacy for the PFL.
They're not legitimate. That's the thing. Here's the thing with PFL. Like, here's my big problem with PFL. You want to know what it is? They don't fit in anywhere. They just don't. They're the third string North American MMA promotion that is trying to be taken seriously. Like LFA, when LFA and RFA merged, or whatever it was, however that merged into the current iteration that is LFA or whatever, like LFC and RFA and merged into LFA, that was a great idea because they merged into a feeder promotion. Like, that is essentially what they are. They are a very solid regional promotion. Strikeforce began its career as a regional promotion to Southern California, and then by virtue of having a ton of talent influx and growing, they grew into a real entity. PFL is trying to skip the growing step and just announce themselves like, hey, here's money. They're trying to affliction this essentially. Like, hey, here's money and here's somebody you maybe have heard of before. Come get it. And that's not how you grow an organization, and you don't fit in because there is a very clear hierarchy. The UFC is one, Bellator is two. The UFC has everybody basically, and Bellator has found a niche in developing younger fighters, very raw prospects, and mixing that with basically the retirement home. So they're taking the top end and the bottom end that the UFC doesn't suck up because it sucks up the whole middle section of talent. The PFL can't do, they can't reproduce Bellator's model. So what do? Like, the other successful organizations have a different thing. Ryzen is Japan. It is Pride 2.0. KSW has the entirety of Eastern Europe that it can draw from. Like, 1FC is Southeast Asia. Like, these are very clear markets that they are playing to and drawing talent from there. The PFL is just trying to put money into a product that will not return anything and is just spinning its wheels to infinity of nothing. It makes no sense to me and never has, and I hate it as a result of that. Like, it's just, I hope these fighters get $1 million. That's it. That's the only good thing I can say, is that maybe 7 basically journeymen or however many, I don't actually know how many tournaments they're going to run, but however many they do, those people will end up making a lot of money that they can take care of their families with. But PFL does not belong in the North American MMA scene in its current iteration, in any iteration that basically RaceFO wants to conduct it as, because he cannot see it as a small thing to grow. It has to be, hey, we're coming to rival Bellator, and you can't. Like, Bellator already owns their corner, and you just need to find a new way to do your own shit.
One last thing I do want to touch on before we end the show is Dana White, it was announced today, is now part of the newest UFC video game, EA Sports UFC 3. Question number 1 for you, Jed. Have you played this game? Do you own it? Do you have any sort of gaming system?
I don't. I own the last 2 UFC games, but I stopped at a 360, so I never ended up getting the. I don't have an Xbox One, so I don't have EA UFC 3 or whatever.
I'm in the same boat as you. I stopped at the PS3, so same generation of consoles, just different company. And yeah, I've never owned any of the UFC games. The EA ones, 1, 2, or 3. Basically, I mean, as far as the reasoning, I just don't know how great they're. I don't know. It doesn't seem like they're getting all that better. I know 2 might have even been worse than 1, and it doesn't really matter. I mean, yeah, whatever. But as far as Dana White being included now, you can play him as a fighter. And something that really stood out to me, his stats are crazy good for who he is. I think it was Mike Bond of MMA Junkie sent out a tweet. I think his striking, Dana striking, is better than former Glory kickboxer Gokhan Saki. I think it's better than Lyoto Machida's. I think his grappling is better than X fighter. I forget who it was. Maybe I can find the tweet.
His grappling is better than Gilbert Burns.
That
multiple-time BJJ champion, but so is Conor McGregor's.
I just find this ridiculous. Should I be so opposed to this, do you think?
No, I don't know. I'm gonna not answer it the way you said. I think this got an unnecessary amount of backlash because it's low hanging fruit and it's kind of fun to mock Dana for it. Am frankly shocked he has not been a DLC far more recently than this. Like, I would have just assumed that he would have been an immediate guy, like, okay, yeah, like, oh, and we'll have, because like every fighting game, and I mean generally just every game has like secret extra incentives and Easter eggs and stuff, and it makes a lot of sense for them. In one of the previous ones, you could be like the tap out guys, um and so like it makes sense that, like, okay, yeah, like let's put Joe Rogan and Dana White and Bruce Lee and Mike Tyson can fight, like, yeah, like I think it's not a big deal that he put himself in the game. I do think it is funny and very easy to make fun of because he gave himself. I mean, I'm sure he didn't give himself, but like whatever. The stats are so loaded and ridiculous. But like the reality is it's a fighting game. And if you're the person who wants to fight with Dana, like with the character of Dana White, I'm sure there are people who think that that's cool and want to do it or whatever. You don't want him to be nerfed. Like you don't want to be like, okay, well, yeah, I want him to have his real stats, so he's 20s across the board and literally can't beat any professional fighter. It doesn't. That's not the point of it. Like Bruce Lee also had like really good stats, and frankly, Bruce Lee can't fight for shit. Like I mean, if you took Bruce Lee from back in the day and just said, hey, here, throw you in a cage, we've pretty conclusively proven that all of that style of martial arts was not really effective against the majority of what I can do today. So like but like nobody bitches about that. It is just because it's Dana White and because it's a little bit ridiculous, but it's fine and it makes sense. I think it's fine. It's
I
whatever.
mean, the thing is, it's easy to bitch about Dana White, and so a lot of
I just think
people,
it's easy to make fun of because it is, and that's fine. Make fun of it. I just think
yeah.
it's. I don't think there's something like fundamentally stupid about it. I just think it's like, oh yeah, ha ha. Like this dude with a massive ego put himself in his own game and made him better than most of the fighters in his game.
Yeah, I mean, it at the end of the day, it shouldn't be taken all that serious. And I mean, I'm not. It's more of, as you said, sort of a ha moment. But I still find it a little ridiculous. But I think the biggest thing, and we have no proof of this, and we never will because the UFC just won't talk about it. But I'm very curious to see or to know, or I wish we could know, but we won't. As I said, if Dana White is basically paying himself to be in the game for his own likeness.
I mean, I don't think that
Like, I don't know if that's a thing that really would
he's
happen.
probably not because he's. I mean, he already gets a percentage of the company, so like he gets a percentage of the deal of the percentage. So I'm sure that he's not paid for his likeness rights in it. Would be my guess. I mean, maybe he is,
Well,
but
I mean, if he is, that's like the most disgusting thing ever. When you have fighters not getting paid for it, but you're them UFC bosses, that'd be terrible. I think my biggest issue with this is that there are still ranked fighters not in the game that
yeah,
deserve to be in
that's
the game.
dumb. That's
That's
dumb.
my biggest concern.
I, I don't think that. I think that the two things aren't really. I think it's one of those things that those two things seem like they are connected, but probably aren't. Like
Like, imagine being a top 15 fighter in the UFC and not being in the video game before a non-fighter.
I think
I would take some offense to that.
I wouldn't. I mostly
If I was a person, if I was a fighter wanting to be in the video game and then I see, Dana White in it.
I would use it as an excuse to get myself into the video game and be like, hey, I would send an angry tweet, and then they would fix it. But like, I don't know. If that's your big problem in life, is that you then like worry about something else. Like
We can say
it's
that about
just
so
like
many things,
whatever.
though. It's like people have concerns in life. It doesn't have to be life or death, but
I mean, I think that that's a real nitpicky one. Like, yeah, like obviously everyone would want to like genuinely everyone would want to be in the game probably. Like that would make sense. But
unless you're
like,
Jaden Johnson, he specifically told me he does not want to be in the game.
see, then yeah, but like most people would want to be in the game, and if they
Correct.
are, that's cool. And if they're not, then okay. Like getting a top 15 ranking nowhere does it say like you're obligated. They're obligated to put you in the game. Like they get to pick who they want to go in the game, and I'm sure there's a system and a reason behind it. And if you ask and kick up enough noise, and you are a top ranked fighter, eventually you're probably going to get there. But like, if you're not,
I mean, fighters
just
don't
fucking
have
move on, do
they don't
something
have the
else.
right to get a title shot, even if they seem to deserve it on paper, even if they've won, say, 6 fights in a row against the top contenders. No fighter, no person has a right for anything, and that's a lot because lack of fighter rights, and hopefully, efforts like Project Spearhead will fix that, or at least try to. But just because they don't have basically because of the privilege to say get a title shot, or I mean, they still deserve it. We know, say Max Holloway before he beat Jose Aldo for the first time, or Pettis, we knew he deserved a title shot. Is he? Does he have the? Is he?
Who gives a shit? Like that's the thing. I can't care anymore because straight up, if this is your problem and you're a professional fighter, I'm speaking directly to you, to whatever fighters are listening to this and haven't turned it off because I'm talking. Go fuck yourself. Because if you are a fighter in the UFC and the issue you have right now is that Dana White is in the video game and you fucking aren't, go read a fucking book, because there are so many other problems of you getting fucked in so many worse ways than getting left out of EA UFC 3. Like I just don't give a fuck. And that's it. Sure, if it's you and you're offended, I'm sorry about it, but I truly could not give a shit about who they left off the UFC video game. Truly could not care less.
I quickly want to touch on an update for the DJ TJ fight, Demetrious Johnson versus TJ Dillashaw. I know there's been a lot said. I haven't followed all of it. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't.
Sadly,
My
yes.
understanding is that Demetrious Johnson still wants the Dillashaw fight, but not at 135. Dillashaw wants it at 25, but plans are still in place, but it's not really going anywhere. I think I'm sort of accurate there. Yeah.
Basically, so I mean, you're accurate on both the DJ and TJ thing. Plans aren't in place. The UFC is actively trying to move away from the fight for whatever reason, but both fighters still want it, so they're kind of trying to not move away from the fight, which is going to lead us to a really weird, shitty impasse that doesn't benefit anybody. But way to go, UFC! You're bad at your jobs.
You're talking about the Demetrious Johnson Cejudo rematch?
I mean, yeah, that thing was floated. From everything I've heard, that is like blatantly not true, and it is the UFC. Like the UFC wants to do that, but there's been no. I'm sure Cejudo's people are for it, but
Of course.
DJ's people have not in any way, shape, or form agreed to it. And he's either going to leverage for more money or leverage for the fucking TJ fight, because he apparently wants the TJ fight now. TJ obviously wants that fight. It's really fucking stupid. And I wish we could move on from this. If the UFC is gonna move, like, I just wanted to shit or get off the pot. If the UFC has decided they don't want to do it, then okay, let's just move on, or let's just make it happen so we can not deal with it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say it's turning into Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor, but when things drag on so long without any legit updates, like DJ saying he wants a TJ fight again, that there's no substance. I mean, to that point, I mean, he said it before. TJ wants it. TJ thinks Garbrandt doesn't deserve a title shot. We know these things. There's been no real big updates ever since this was first an idea, and so that's what I find annoying about it, and the fact that I don't think it should happen at 125. DJ has really no interest in going to 35, so I just think, hey, do
Move the
DJ
fuck
versus
on. Yeah, move the fuck on. Go to Cejudo. Like, do the Cejudo fight. It's fine.
Cejudo, or and then after that, I mean, Benavidez Pettis winner, I guess.
Yeah, that's
Um,
100%. That's how that goes.
I mean, flyweight's not as great, obviously, just because we have such a dominant champion. That's expected. But bantamweight's so good. I mean, I love Dillashaw versus, say, the winner of Rivera Moraes. That's an outstanding fight. Or even, you
If
know,
if the winner of Rivera Moraes doesn't get a title shot, I might just have to give up on the sport. Like, there is no clearer cut title eliminator than that fucking fight,
yeah.
and it would be the height of stupidity.
Well,
for
actually, it's not as clear as some. We've seen some really clear ones, like clear as the morning
I
sky with no clouds in it. But
I think it is easily that clear. The winner of
I
that
think
fight.
the only thing that makes it not like 100% clear, it's still very clear. They deserve it wholeheartedly, entirely. But Rafael Sunsao is the only argument, or is the only person in the top four or five that has an argument for the title shot.
I look, you know, I'm a Rafael Sunsao fan. He's never getting the title shot, so it's extremely
I never
clear to
said he
me.
was, but
Yeah,
I think
I don't even think he has an argument. I genuinely just don't. Like, I think he need if he beats if they did a Sunsao Cruz and he beat Cruz, then yes, he has the argument,
well, yes, that's
or Garbrandt.
yeah.
But if not, the winner of Marias Rivera is the clear like the clear number one contender. And that's the thing. Like you said it, bantamweight is full of interesting title challengers that guess what? TJ Dillashaw hasn't fucking fought. He's only fought like 3 people in the top 15. Like DJ cleared out his division, and if DJ wants to move up to 135, absolutely. But DJ doesn't want to do that because, according to DJ, like his words are that he has no interest in competing at that division long term because he wants to fight another 5 or 6 years, and he thinks that fighting against guys that outweigh him by that much, that are that much bigger than him, will shorten his career, put too much wear and tear on his body. And you know what? Straight up, that's like a really reasonable way to approach things. Like, yeah, I can maximize my longevity, my ability to make money by continuing to compete in this division and just being the best that there ever has been at doing what I do. And I respect the shit out of that, and that's fine. But if he doesn't want to move up, then sweet. Dillashaw can either vacate his fucking belt and drop down, or he can just get to the business of being a champion. This is a whole different argument, and I won't talk about it, but I will just say this. I honestly have come around to the idea that Conor McGregor is the worst thing that ever happened in mixed martial arts. And I've been sitting on this take for a while, and I truly fucking believe it because he broke so much of kind of the structure of the UFC in the way he operated and the way he became such an enormous star and brought such gravitas that he fundamentally changed how everything worked. And I mean, I guess broke is a wrong way to put it, but
No,
I
it's 100%
no,
the right
it's
way.
not because the sport continues, but it continues in a different fashion. But he broke it for me. I enjoy this sport so much less because Conor McGregor has been a part of it. I can't really quantify it in a functional way. Like, and it's not some old man at the clouds like, oh, back in my day, I believe fighters and fighting is better. But everything else about this sport is less enjoyable to me because it is a fucking stupid ass circus. And that's not what I'm in it for. And I think a lot of that can be attributed to Conor McGregor. And if somehow we get TJ Dillashaw versus Mighty Mouse while the 135 division sits on 4 really good contenders for him, I'm going to be fucking furious.
I don't think that's really a hot take. The only reason I guess you would classify it is because Conor McGregor is Conor McGregor, and a lot of people like him a lot, and he's the biggest star. But I think in a way he has changed in a negative way the UFC, and changed the perspective of a lot of UFC champions and top contenders and all of that. The whole super fight thing, money fight era started because of Conor McGregor, and we all are calling for more stars. We want big stars. We want the sport to grow, and it's kind of going down, and we don't want that. But maybe we really don't want huge stars because the last one, Conor McGregor, and we don't know where where he is right now.
I don't want huge stars.
No.
I want less events and good quality fighting. And I know that that's not a way for the sport to be big and popular because it isn't. But like, I don't give a fuck. I'm a fan first, and I like it when I'm just watching the best guys compete. Like the allure to the UFC has always been that to me at least, that realistically, like the best fighters are almost always competing against the best competition, and you are hashing it out as a sport and the sporting aspect of it, and the rest of that shit was gone. And like Pride was cool because it did that, but it just approached it in a more fun way. But this is like the worst of both worlds.
I agree. Well, let's move on to dumb questions. We just have one, so this will literally take a second, and you have You cannot answer this question. It is from Steve Jeffs. You can follow him on Twitter at Steves_Simpson. He says, "Did you try the Swedish meatballs at IKEA, Nick?" And this is because I tweeted yesterday that I was going to the IKEA about 10 minutes from my house for the first time, and it had opened in November 2012. So over 5 years ago, I've never stepped foot inside of it. I didn't end up going. Plans changed. We didn't have time, or we didn't go. It doesn't really matter why. And so I have yet to go there, and I have obviously yet to try their Swedish meatballs. But I hear they're good. Can you confirm that?
They're surprisingly not bad. I mean, I always thought it was weird when people. I didn't go to IKEA for a really long time until I was like well into my 20s, and people were like, "Oh, you gotta go!" And like when you're there, get the thing. I was like, it's kind of weird to go to a furniture store and get food, but they're good. They're good quality Swedish meatballs. So I mean, they're not like amazing, but they're solid.
That's good. I mean, I guess they're like $1 or something. So
Yeah,
I
they're
guess for
really
the
cheap.
price.
Yeah, they're really cheap and they're like not bad. And so it's and you do it because it's a thing to do. It's what everyone does when they go to IKEA. So whenever you do go, which probably is soon, you'll go to college, you'll need to buy some furniture of some fashion to stock your dorm or however that's
I'll
going
be
to work.
living with my aunt, so no.
You'll need a desk that she doesn't have in your room.
Probably
Yeah,
to do this show.
and you have to go to IKEA, and when you do, stop in and get some meatballs.
I will definitely do that. Hopefully, I will be at IKEA before September, but knowing me, considering it's been 5.5 years, I probably won't be. Well, that does it for episode 155 of the MMA Circus. Thank you all for watching. We really appreciate it. You can check us out on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Google Play, SoundCloud, BloodyElbow.com, TuneIn, Player FM, Overcast, and Podcast Addict, and pretty much anywhere else you can find a podcast. We're everywhere. If I named a podcast app you use or if I didn't name an app you use, check us out there. We're probably on there. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this podcast down there. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. It helps me out a lot. I'm hoping to get to 1,000 subscribers. Still pretty far away, but you can help. One subscriber is better than 0. So please do that down there. And any feedback for the show, drop a message in the comment section down below, and I will reply if need be ASAP. Although I am, I'll be gone, so maybe I won't. Jed, thanks for coming on short notice as our guest co-host this week. Remind everybody, if they're not already following you, where they can do so, and also where they can check out all your MMA stuff.
Follow me on Twitter at Jed K. Meshew. You can find fun tweets about me lambasting Conor McGregor for ruining mixed martial arts. And you can find all my writing at MMAfighting.com.
You guys can find me on the Twitter at Nick Baldwin MMA. You can find all my writing over at BloodyElbow.com. You can also find this podcast there. You might be listening to us on BloodyElbow.com. So if you are, just go to the homepage and check out some of my latest articles as well as my colleagues' latest work. As I said, I won't be doing much work till early April, end of March. Get back on the 29th. And so that's when my MMA coverage will resume, so to speak. So that's pretty much it. Thank you all for watching. We appreciate it. Have a great night. For Jed Meshew, I'm Nick Baldwin, and we're out.